Howdy again, everybody. This is Doc with Thoroughfan, and we are just a couple of months away now from the implementation of at least part of the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. This is, of course, the racetrack safety component of it. The medication and the anti-doping component of it is still a little bit up in the air. We don't know exactly what's going on with that or when implementation might start with that. However, we were teased a little bit from some of the people that are responsible for working with HISA, or HISA, whichever you want to call it, and the authority board at the most recent RSI conference. Some of the people reporting there saying that the executive director of HISA did come out and say that they are very close to announcing a deal, potentially with an organization to take over the medication and doping part of things. So just have to stay tuned and see what's going on. But until that time, we are going to kind of break down a little bit more of the safety side of things here at Thoroughfan, and this is going to be a little bit of a multi-part series here. We don't want to throw everything at you all at once, so we're going to break it down kind of into sections. And I'm not going to lie, some of this stuff is probably going to seem a little boring at times, but at Thoroughfan, we really believe that education is the way to help fans understand the industry, understand what's going on, and when things are potentially reported in the press, be it the racing media or the general media, you kind of want to have an idea of what's going on, and some of these things regarding HISA and the committees that are set up and the people that are involved may be going on behind the scenes. So we want you to understand everything about this bill and the regulations that were recently approved to fully understand what's going on and how this is hopefully going to make things a lot better for the integrity and the safety of racing. So let's jump right in. It is known as the Rule 2000 series that this is all under. This is the series of rules and regs that the FTC recently approved. So they have gone through the entire regulatory approval process at this point. They are basically stated in law after the FTC approval, and we are ready to go and have the racetrack starting to accomplish some of this stuff. And the first thing, of course, is overall racetrack accreditation. And this is probably the most important thing under the rules of HISA and the law of HISA. I just did it there. See, HISA, tomato, tomato, whatever you want to call it. But under the laws of HISA, a racetrack has to be accredited by the authority of HISA in order to carry on horse racing. So the first thing for all racetracks is to make sure they're accredited. And there are two types of initial accreditation that are going to be granted by the HISA authority here. And this is all really kind of under the auspices initially of the Racetrack Safety Committee, which again, remember, was one of the two standing committees that were created under the bill. The other was the Medication and Anti-Doping Committee. They're not really involved in this side of it. So for the Racetrack Safety Committee, what's going to happen is they're going to offer tracks initially one of two types of accreditation. The first is what is known as interim accreditation, and this is for tracks that have already been and are currently accredited under the NTRA Safety and Integrity Accreditation Program. And we're showing a map now. This is straight off the NTRA website. These are all the tracks that currently have NTRA accreditation in good standing in the U.S. And so all of these tracks will basically be granted what we call interim accreditation. And this can last probably for a period of about 3 years. But under the initial accreditation, it's probably going to last only until the HISA Racetrack Safety Committee can get around to all of these tracks and make sure that what's going on at those tracks also meets the standards of HISA's accreditation standards. And we don't know exactly how long that's going to take. That's probably going to be at least a couple of years. The other end of it is what's known as provisional accreditation, and these are for tracks that are not NTRA safety and integrity accredited. So these types of tracks will have accreditation given on almost like a probationary status for a period of 1 year, and that can then be extended out year after year, provided those tracks are making the good faith efforts to meet all of the standards that HISA is going to have in place and the Racetrack Safety Committee is going to have in place. So once all of those things get together, basically, the tracks are going to be accredited for a period of anywhere between 1 and 7 years. That's the way it's written in the law, which is kind of interesting to me, but I guess it just kind of depends on how good the track is already set up and if they really need to pay more attention to a specific track or one track they trust a little bit more. So the process of getting accredited is going to go something like this. First, a racetrack is going to apply for accreditation to the HISA Racetrack Safety Committee. The committee is going to have a whole written set of questions and things that the racetrack is going to have to fill out and submit to them, answering some very basic questions, I'm sure, to start. After that, the Racetrack Safety Committee is going to perform an on-site inspection of the racetrack facility and see if it is up to the standards based on, I guess, a checklist or, whatever kind of measuring stick they are going to use. After that, the committee that did the on-site visit is going to prepare a report for the racetrack to say, you're good in these areas, you're not good in these other areas, we need you to increase here. The tracks are going to have a certain period of time to respond to those requests and show what they're doing to go to that level, to hit that bar of accreditation. And then finally, the Racetrack Safety Committee is going to take all of that information, look at everything, meet, and then decide whether to recommend to the authority board to grant accreditation to that racetrack or not. So that's the basic process. You can look all of this stuff up online on the HISA website where the regulations are listed. I am delving deep into it, but I'm not going word for word or line for line. So you certainly can look at that if you want and see the exact particulars of every single little thing. So that's kind of the way that whole process is going to work for accreditation. The question comes up, well, what if a track doesn't meet those standards? And so there is a section in there that talks about suspension of status and revocation of status. It's kind of general. It doesn't go into a lot of specifics, but what it basically states is that racetracks are going to have a certain period of time to try to deal with issues that are raised by the Racetrack Safety Committee to reach accreditation status. Now, some of these things are going to take a little bit longer than others to implement or to get up and running. But if the Racetrack Safety Committee and the authority don't really feel that they are making the good faith effort, or the effort is not there, or the progress is not there, they can suspend the accreditation of that racetrack. And under suspension, that racetrack cannot run races. It says if there's still no effort after that, the authority can certainly consider revoking the accreditation status of those tracks. It doesn't really go into any further detail, at least in this section, as far as what happens after that. Can tracks reapply for accreditation? Are they done forever? Nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen there, and maybe that's kept a little vague for a reason. So that's kind of the where we are with the accreditation process. So that's what's going to be starting up soon, and I'm sure that HISA has been talking to all the tracks about this. The next thing that we're going to talk about in regards to the Rule 2000 series is all the racetracks are going to have to create, as part of the getting accredited, what's known as a Racetrack Safety and Welfare Committee. Now, this is not the same as the Racetrack Safety Committee that is under HISA. These are individual tracks that will be creating their own committees. These committees technically report to the Racetrack Safety Committee, who then reports up to the authority board for any types of sanctions or anything like that. So we're going to go a little bit into what the responsibilities and the makeup of this Racetrack Safety and Welfare Committee is, and then we're going to talk about some of the key players, and then we're going to wrap it up for this part of the segments, and then we'll dive into some other aspects in future segments. So let's get to it. First thing, who is going to be required to be on these Racetrack Safety and Welfare Committees? Well, it's going to be made up of a regulatory and an association veterinarian, and we'll talk about who those are in a little bit. A safety steward, which some tracks already have. It could be safety steward, safety officer. Some tracks don't have it, some tracks do. A horseman's representative, a trainer and jockey that are part, obviously, of that racetrack colony. And finally, the racing secretary and the track superintendent. So those are going to be the main players that are on this committee. They probably can ask other groups to present to the committee or provide input to the committee as needed, but these are going to be the standing members of the committee. And so the initial kind of main requirements of this committee, or the duties of this committee, I'm breaking down for all of these things into kind of like top 5 big things. Now, there are other little things that they will be responsible for. You can read about that in the regulations, but this kind of delves into what, at least I feel, is the most important aspects of each of these groups. So the first is they're going to review all catastrophic equine injuries and major human injuries as well. And we'll talk about why that's important as to, who is also going to be involved in racetrack safety. But so they're going to review all of these things. They're going to try to see if there was a way through investigation and talking with all the parties involved that they could mitigate the chances of that happening in the future. They're also going to kind of develop injury mitigation strategies. So they're going to look at some of the science and see if there's things overall that everybody at the racetrack can do to hopefully keep injuries on the racetrack down. They're going to address and deal with any potential racetrack safety issues that are brought to their attention by anybody on the racetrack. And, again, they're just going to try to enhance, the overall racetrack safety for everybody that's involved, the equine and the human participants. So that's kind of the overall duties of the Racetrack Safety and Welfare Committee. Now, there's going to be certain people that are, as I said, are going to be on this committee, and certain people that are just also going to have to be required to be a part of every racetrack community now going forward if they are going to maintain accreditation with HISA. So the first is what's known as a safety director. And this can be the regulatory veterinarian and or the safety steward as well. So some of these roles can be combined, and you'll see that as we go through. Certain people can sort of hold multiple roles at a racetrack to make things easier on the track, to be able to afford to bring somebody in or to find people when it's hard to find people for a lot of jobs. So the safety director can be a regulatory veterinarian, a safety steward, somebody who has a good working knowledge of the racetrack. So some of their responsibilities are going to be basically kind of creating an overall feeling of safety, or a culture, as we call it, of safety for all the racetrack participants. It's going to be creating and maintaining standards of procedures, or SOPs as we call them, for all the safety protocols that are in place. Creating emergency drills for major equine injuries that happen on the racetrack, as well as gate malfunction issues. So these seem to be the two areas of safety that they're really going to be focusing on. They're going to serve as kind of a liaison a little bit between the racetrack and the Racetrack Safety Committee and the authority on the whole accreditation process and maintaining that accreditation. And they're also going to be responsible for reporting all equine injuries and fatalities to the authority board within 72 hours of them occurring. This is interesting because while a lot of stuff is defined, at least I can't find it in this section, the term injury is not. So we don't know if this means any major injuries that happen on the track. Obviously, fatalities are, that speaks for itself. But at what level does reporting an injury, reach that threshold? Is it a major injury? Is it a minor injury? So that's going to be kind of interesting to see how that goes. So that's the responsibility of the safety director. Next, we have what's known as the medical director. And this is not a medical director on the veterinary side of things. This is a medical director for the humans that are there at the racetrack. And this is actually a very, very important addition. So this person who's going to be a medical director can be either a licensed physician in the state, or a board certified athletic trainer. Is the way the law kind of works it out. So they are going to be responsible for a multitude of things, but some of the big ones are, making sure that the safety for the humans is paramount among everything. You're seeing some of the other things listed here that is going to be really important. One of the big things I think that they are definitely going to be responsible for, and is very good, is initiating this kind of uniform concussion protocol for jockeys and exercise riders, anybody who gets on a horse really, to make sure that that is kind of followed and uniform throughout the country. And this has been something that's been in development for a while and has been shown to be very effective. They kind of get a baseline neurologic exam on the riders, and then if anything were to happen to them, they can compare that baseline to their findings. And really, they are going to be the ones that are going to sign off and say, hey, it's okay to ride or it's not okay to ride based on the findings of that. And that is really important for maintaining the safety of everybody out there. They are, of course, also going to be responsible for overseeing the safety of all the participants that are involved in racing, especially doing things like ensuring that there's proper transportation for anybody injured to either an on-track first aid facility or to a local hospital. And that hospital has to have, to my understanding, a level 1 or a level 2 trauma center, because as you can imagine, jockeys that are injured in races, they suffer some pretty severe trauma. Exercise riders too. Anybody dealing around horses can suffer life-threatening trauma, at the drop of a hat. So, they have to have those kind of agreements in place and move them around quickly. So that's going to be some of the responsibilities for the medical director. Next, we kind of go on to the regulatory veterinarian, and we're going to delve a little bit more into this in future segments when we talk about inspection of horses and things like that. But the regulatory veterinarian is basically a veterinarian that is employed not by the racetracks, but by the state racing commission themselves or the state. So basically they are employed by the state. They are not private practicing veterinarians in regards to being on the racetrack grounds. When they are on the grounds, they are there in capacity of the state. They are not working on individual horses. They are not taking money for any kind of sales or services rendered to any of the horses there. They are really there just to perform their state duties. And so some of the main ones, again, as we pop up this list, notifying stewards of any horse that really is unfit to race. This has really been a big thing, and this is something that everybody has really been trying to focus on, identifying these horses that are not fit to race before they actually get to the race or the heavy training stage, so we can cut down on some of these injuries. Maintaining a vets list, and we'll do another segment on just exactly what the vets list is and things that are on and not on it, probably for a future segment here at ThoroughFan. But you know, the vets list horses that are on it, and then report that list to the stewards on a regular basis. Conducting pre-race examinations for every horse that is entered to race. If people follow racing fairly closely, you've noticed that that has been an issue out at Arizona for some of the tracks, most notably Turf Paradise, because they have not had enough veterinarians. At least the allegation is they've not had enough veterinarians to perform pre-race inspections on every horse, and this puts horse and rider at risk because those issues cannot be found ahead of time. So really important, you're going to have every single horse looked at as far as that goes. If a horse is injured in a major way in a race, or probably even on training too, the state vet is responsible providing emergency care for that horse up to and including potential euthanasia if it's a real catastrophic injury that cannot be saved. And then coordinating transport of that horse back to the barn, to an equine hospital, to wherever, where the attending veterinarian can then take over that horse's care. And finally, they are responsible for scratching any horse that they basically feel is unfit to race. And that's a really important thing. And hopefully they will be granted, the way this looks like it is written to me anyway, kind of sole authority on that. In some jurisdictions, they have to report it to the stewards, and the stewards have to decide whether to scratch the horse. Well, fortunately, that's changing a lot now. And so it's now just the veterinarian's call, and if they feel the horse is unfit, the horse is scratched. So that's a really good thing as well. So that's, you know, a brief overview of the regulatory veterinarian's role. When we do future segments talking about inspection of horses and things, we'll delve a little bit more into how the veterinarian's role is in there. And then finally, we've got the racetrack safety officer. We talked a little bit about this. It's not the same thing as the safety director. The safety director kind of oversees all of the safety issues going on with the racetrack. The racetrack safety officer is a little bit more fine-tuned to regulatory things regarding safety. So this person, again, can also be a steward, a safety steward as well. Can't be a veterinarian, at least doesn't state it in the rules, but it, you know, certainly can be a state steward. And their responsibility basically is to monitor all things that are going on the racetrack, both at the barn area, the backside, and the front side, the racetrack area, to ensure that all of the regulations and rules are being followed. They are also responsible for carrying out what we call pre-race meet racetrack safety inspections. So making sure that the track is good, that all of the safety measures at the track are good, the track surfaces are safe. You know, dealing with anything in that realm. They are also, and this is a very important one that I think is really crucial for improving the welfare of horses and things, and that is they are going to assist the regulatory veterinarians in following up on horses that are either barred from racing because they're just declared unfit to race, or placed on the vets list for some reason. And this has always been a problem around racetracks, where a regulatory veterinarian may notice a horse coming back lame from a race, or the horse severely bleeds, or something like that, and they are placed on the vets list. Well, really, to get off the vets list, it used to be they just had to satisfy certain conditions put forth by the regulatory veterinarian. But we don't know what's happened in that time frame. This hopefully will allow to make sure that the horses that are placed on the vets list are getting the appropriate and timely vet care they need, because they could be placed on the vet list and they may never race again. But we still don't know what happens to that horse. So hopefully this is going to serve as a little bit of a conduit to get that information and follow up on some of these horses to make sure they do get the care that they need post-injury or post-event that causes them to be on the vets list, and to make sure that they are not trying to be snuck in somehow in another jurisdiction, or trying to get around the vets list rule somehow, or things like that, to be raced when they are not fit to be raced. So that's a really important thing. And And then the final things is, as we talked about again, they can conduct random license checks with all the participants on the backside and the front side, making sure they all are properly licensed. And they can provide random barn searches. And these are not the type of barn searches, at least, again, how I'm reading these regulations. These are not the barn searches that would look for contraband, any kind of illegal doping, things like that. That, I think, is going to be handled by the other side of the HISA responsibility of the Medication and Anti-Doping Committee. But they still do have to make sure that safety regulations are being followed, fire precautions are all in place, all the other things that would be required to maintain the health and welfare of the horses and the humans there have to be up to a certain standard. Now, if this person were to happen to walk upon something and find something that might indicate doping is going on, I'm sure they can report that to the proper authorities, but they cannot specifically search for those types of things, to my knowledge, as to what's kind of in the bill and the regulations, at least that have been approved to this point. So that is where we are going to kind of cut things off for this first segment. Again, I apologize. I know it's probably a little boring when you're just going through, certain personnel and what their responsibilities are, but we really do feel that it is important to understand everything with this legislation and these regulations, because this is going to be what racing is going forward, folks. Unless something changes from the courts aspect of things, everybody has to understand exactly what's going on, who's going to be responsible for what, and how it's all going to play out. And that's what we are all about at Thoroughfan, because we just want to be able to provide that information to you guys so that you can go ahead and make a proper and educated decision as to how you feel about certain things. So until we hit the next segment in this series, I am Doc, and as always, if you are looking for the most accurate and up-to-date information about this wonderful sport of horse racing that is done solely by the fans, for the fans, there's only one place you need to turn, and that's right here at Thoroughfan.